Hey guys, Walter Fedczuk here to tell you that Unicorn.com may be the world's premier esports betting site, but they're also your best bet for keeping up with all the esports you love. With their site's newest update, they've reinvented their Live Now system and created a TV guide style layout to find out when your favorite teams will be playing next. And if that isn't simple enough, they've even added a search bar to help filter it down even further. And even if you aren't a gambling fan, Unicorn's newest update is a must-have for any esports fan. And you might even discover your favorite new writer in their news section, where you've got my man Drowlin with some excellent CSGO content, and you can find some fantastic articles from my lovely co-host, Chase Wassenar, as well. So check out the new layout at Unicorn.com, because there are few places where you can stay up to date on all your favorite esports, and Unicorn can help. Unicorn.com. Welcome to the new Sportsbook. Hello Internet, my name is Walter Ceades Fedczuk. It is that time of the year. It is playoff time. We're going to talk about the playoffs. And of course, when I say we, I mean my good friend Chase, RedShirtKing Wassenar. Chase, since I'm the host and you're the guest, it's clear to all of our fans that we are, of course, talking about the European summer split playoffs here. And after week 10, I'm not sure this region actually exists anymore. I feel like it might just be a figment of my imagination. Were you sports entertained by week 10, Chase? Because I certainly was not.
Sports entertained is an interesting phrase for it. On the one hand, I do appreciate playing a series for the fans. It's a meaningless series. People do tend to have fun with it. I get it. It's not for me. As an analyst, I draw nothing from it, and I do agree with people who say that it's a wasted opportunity. When you look at, specifically, we're talking about Misfits versus Roccat and Splice versus Vitality, where both of those meaningless matches ended up in champion pick and bans, where there was all weird kind of picks that would never be picked in the traditional competitive meta, and everyone was playing different positions. I don't think that's ideal. I certainly hope they weren't spending time to practice and be like, yo, let me do the thing. So I really hope that this is just a one-off kind of shenanigansy day that didn't take any time and energy away from their actual prep. I wish that especially Misfits had taken the time to sort out their strategies. I think that Misfits is in a bit of a rut right now. They're going to be the only team in Europe heading into playoffs with a losing record, and that's something where going into a series against Unicorns of Love, I would have thought you'd want to iron out some of those kinks in the plan. Maybe they just, after seeing the Kingslayers Roccat take down one more great team in their victory over G2, maybe they're just like, man, we can't step to the Kingslayers. I guess we should just meme and hope that works out.
So here's the worst thing for you about Roccat embracing this Kingslayers myth. I don't know if they make any changes now. I don't know if they make any changes.
I have a feeling they're going to make one. I think there's going to be. I think we're going to see a new coach in.
Coach! I meant player, because I think Betsy played well enough to be you can. Okay,
I hope
playing
not.
well enough. He'll stick around. That's the worst thing that could happen. That's the worst thing that can happen to a mediocre team, is that they have this nice little run at the end of the season, and everyone's like, okay, well, they're starting to get it together, and then they look in the off season and go, oh yeah. They're starting to get it together. I don't know if we really need to make any changes. Let's just run it back. It'll be better, because this is what happened to Roccat between spring and summer, and then now it's happening at the end of summer again. I don't mean to hop on Roccat. Congratulations, you guys won. I'm glad you're happy, Chase. I'm glad you now have this whole Kingslayer motif. I'm sure Seth Rollins will be suing you guys for trademark infringement or something. I want to focus on the Misfits and Splice point, because as much as that these were meaningless games when it comes to the impact on the standings and any of that jazz, and that is Riot's fault for making Week 10 basically worthless. I will completely point that at Riot. But these games, Splice and Misfits are not the same tier as the other four teams. They're in the playoffs. They're just not. They haven't been. They weren't in the spring, and they aren't now. And if anything, the gap between those 4 teams and Splice and Misfits, I think, kind of grew a little bit over the course of the summer. I think those 4 teams have gotten a touch better as a group, while Splice and Misfits have kind of stayed the same path, maybe gotten a little bit worse, I think, in the case of Misfits, especially from where they were last split. And this is on stage practice time, because this is one of the things I brought up. Riot Ice Chest reached out to me on Twitter with a comment I made about the Challenger scene. What do I want to see out of the Challenger scene when they move to this Academy League? I want them to get more stage time. I want the Challenger teams to have more time on the stage where it actually matters, because at the end of the day, the actual games that count are on a stage in front of people when you get up to the LCS level. And that's what I just think Splice and Misfits kind of poo-pooed their nose at here and said, well, whatever. It doesn't matter what happens, so why should we care? Why should you care? You're about to go into series against the 2 finalists from last spring. And, they're not slouches. G2, sure, they're playing worse. Unicorns of Love arguably are playing a little bit worse. But they're not slouches. They aren't sloughing off. They didn't spend the entire season kind of thumbing their nose at everyone and be like, oh, well, we know we're going to make the playoffs. We're going to pull a San Antonio Spurs and just turn it on when it actually matters. They're good teams. And you just kind of looked at this on-stage practice time where you could work on things against weaker opponents and focus on your macro decision-making in the case of Splice. You could focus on your early game aggression in the terms of Misfits. The early game aggression in terms of Splice. You could have worked on all of these things. You could have taken the L, but at least got better at some of these weaknesses that you have that are going to be very important when you play up against these 2 top 4 teams in Europe. So I'm really disappointed in the team's management, coaching staff, players for just kind of looking at these and kind of shrugging it off and saying, it doesn't matter. Let's take our vacation this week and then just focus on the playoffs. And I don't know what was going on behind the scenes. Maybe they were practicing really hard in scrims, but all I can do is see what I see on the stage. And that was a joke. It was a joke.
Hey, future Walter.
I don't care. I don't care.
For your bleep there.
I don't care.
Look, here's my counter argument. If you're Misfits or Splice, the last thing you want to do is reveal anything about your strategy under the quarterfinals. Now, I'm not saying that that's the correct answer and that that's more important than all the other factors. But as we saw, in the other series this week, right? Fnatic versus Ninjas in Pajamas. Fnatic clearly had not practiced for that series. They played it straight up, and they lost anyway because they underestimated their opponents. They were cocky. They were arrogant in pick and ban. They were arrogant in how they played around the map. Picking standard champions doesn't mean that you're taking the match any more seriously. We should not condemn Misfits and Splice for picking weird things when Fnatic, G2, and Unicorns of Love all failed to show up to their first series this week. And they don't have the excuse of, oh, well, we were playing weird picks and we were kind of goofing around. Those teams were trying, and they got O2. Or in G2's case, they got AMAP. So if we're going to call teams out, then we call all of the playoff teams in Europe out.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
Them put in their A game. So, and if you want to do that, that's fine.
Yeah,
in my opinion, I think that with the exception of Unicorns of Love versus H2K, we had a week 10 that did not matter and was never going to matter, and everyone knows it. And when that happens, I don't it's hard to gear back in. It's hard for me to tell Fnatic or H2K or any of those teams you should be taking this week 100% super seriously instead of spending this entire week and buying yourself an extra week of prep against who your first round opponent's going to be, because we knew what these playoff matches were all going to be with the exception of one. And that one, to be clear, was an important one, and Unicorns of Love bowed out, and it's unfortunate that happened because it meant that we didn't have anything to really look forward to on that last Sunday. But I mean,
it's a lack of professionalism, honestly, and I agree. Unicorns of Love, Fnatic, G2, they should all be held accountable for that too. The most professional team I think that went out this week was H2K and Ninjas in Pajamas. Those were the two teams.
H2K got so much crap for that from social media last year for doing the same thing. Every split, they always play super seriously in the last week.
They should. When other people
they
should.
Look. They
should. The season is 10 weeks long. I don't care if nothing matters in week 10. You're a professional athlete. And it is your job to go out and win games. And when you pick Heimerdinger and you move all your positions around and you do all this stuff, that's not professional. That's not going out and doing your job. If I went into work tomorrow and I work in retail and I just decided I don't want to be a cashier today, I want to be a manager, and get fired. You don't get to do that. I don't get to walk in, if I work at Walmart, I don't get to walk into Walmart wearing the Target uniform. You don't get to do that. There's a level of professionalism, and I know I sound just like Skip Bayless right now. I'm hearing Skip Bayless in the back of my head, but there is a level of professionalism that esports just has not reached yet that really irks me, because 90% of the time we're at the edge where we're like, yeah, we're really professional. We take everything seriously. We're trying to shed this image of us kind of being, 20-something-year-old guys that are all kind of joking around. We're getting all these big money investors. And then a week like week 10 happens where they thumb their nose at competitive integrity because it doesn't matter in the long run, and they pick stupid crap and do this kind of stuff. I don't want to root for Splice when they do that. Yeah, it's all good. It's for the fans. I don't care. I want them to lose that. I don't want them to succeed in the playoffs now because they've told me they don't care about winning. So why should I reward them with wanting to see them succeed in the playoffs? H2K, in all honesty, I am rooting for H2K to win this season because from day one, they have busted their asses to improve and to get better. And that series against the Unicorns of Love at the end, where it did not matter to either one of them, and this is why I'm a little less, on Unicorns of Love, because Unicorns of Love screwed up the Vitality series, but that series against H2K was a war. And they said, no, we're going to stay undefeated in series against H2K. We're going to put all the pressure on them in the playoffs to come beat us. And I applaud them for that series. But H2K, from day one until the end of week 10, is the one team in Europe that took every single game seriously, that took every single game as do or die. And they have all my respect. And I love you, Yos. I love you, Marty. But H2K is the team that has earned my respect and want to see them succeed because of the amount of hard work that they put in. I can't see what you do in practice. I can only go by what I physically see on the screen. And goofing off on your first match when you need to win it to still have a chance at the number one seed in your group, it doesn't cut it for me. Sorry.
Yeah. Look, this reminds me of every time if I see an animated show on the newest Disney Channel thing. My first instinct is always to say oh man, cartoons are, getting. I can't believe we're in this era. Everything's getting worse, whatever. And at some point I realized it's just not intended for me anymore. If I was that young, maybe I'd feel differently because it would be directed at me. It just isn't for me. These games were not meant for you and I as analysts. They were not we were not the target audience. The target audience were all of the people who memed about it on Reddit and on Twitter. And those games, I believe, had higher viewership numbers than a lot of the other series. People were like, oh, you got to see this. This is stupid. We got some crazy things going on right now. Can you believe Heimerdinger is here? That is something that these teams can use as marketing. And I'm not going to tell a team that they are wrong for embracing a marketing opportunity that is absolutely in their wheelhouse. When the ability to market yourself and put forward a approachable team identity, if you will, is more valuable than a win in the standings, because the win is literally not valuable. I understand it. Doesn't mean I like it. I'm with you. I am a competitive person. I want to see 100% serious games. Those are the games I like most. People who joined me on the VOD review for the silly games this week will tell you that I was basically checked out for that entire series because there was nothing meaningful to gain from this. It was just kind of funny in a comedic sense, in the same way that, when Riot does the Earth show match, it's funny. I expect that from Riot,
different.
Not from a professional team.
That's entirely different because it's not an actual scheduled match that actually does impact the standings. And at the end of the day,
it doesn't impact the standings.
At the end, yes, it does. They whether it changes their position in the standings or not, they either get a win or a loss in the win-loss column for whatever happens during that match. That still counts.
There's one thing
they don't get to write it off.
I will say that I get frustrated with. And it's that this screws up all of our numbers when we're setting our all-pro stats. The North American list came out, and then I'm going to release my ballot on TwitLonger or something. I haven't done it yet, but since it makes no sense to do a podcast on it now since it's already been done. But I do believe that this is a situation in which every time I want to put out these numbers like, oh yeah, look at this great KDA that Suncooks has. Now I have to go back and look at a series like, was that artificially boosted by shenanigans when he was playing like top lane in this weird series against Vitality? Like it's silly, and I hate that it affects our ability to look at the long form finished stats of the year. If Tom Brady chooses to sit out a game, Tom Brady doesn't have numbers for the game. We don't have an equivalent for like if Tom Brady decided to play like on his head the entire time. Like I don't know what the silliness would have to be. Like I don't know how you'd match the absurdity, but this affects the numbers and this affects what goes into the record books in that regard. And for that, to that extent, I agree with you. I think we're at a point right now where like teams just clearly don't care about that. I mean, look at Cloud9's voting record in All Pro Awards. Like teams just don't care. I do, and you do, but they don't. And I think it's mixed whether or not they ultimately the fans ultimately care. I'm not sure. And then let us know in the comments. Did you have fun? Because we clearly did not. One of us is angrier about it than the other, but I got nothing out of it.
Final word before we actually move on to the series. Splice, Misfits, after you guys get 3-1'd this weekend, you let me know if you think that fun, that, good, let me play Mimi stuff. Let's see if that was worth it over the extra, 4 or 5 hours that you could have had on stage practice time. You let me know if it was worth it. Okay. That's all I have to say on that.
Sure. Okay. Let's talk about some series, because
let's talk about some series. The very first series of the weekend. I just put everybody on blast.
Yeah, you did. Like you called them out by name too. I appreciate it.
I called the owners out by name too. I'm sure. Ben Spoon. There you go. The Misfits one. There we go. Now we got you, Pat Riley and the Miami Heat. You all should be ashamed of yourselves. There we go. I called everybody out. Everyone, all at the same time.
Wow.
Unicorns of Love versus Misfits. We're never having Yos or Marty on this show again, ever. I'm sorry, guys. Unicorns of Love versus Misfits.
I just want to stress I love everybody. And I love this Unicorns of Love team. This is going to be an interesting series.
Is it?
It should be.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Quantify that. Why do you think it's interesting?
So the one thing that we know about Misfits is that they have a very good mid laner. Power of Evil is their star player. They funnel all the resources onto him, and he's done a pretty good job with that. Now, in recent weeks, that's been less so. They've tried to be a little bit more equitable in how they distribute gold. Right. I'm not sure whether that's for better or for worse. Right now, Hansama is actually getting more gold per game on average than Power of Evil is, which certainly was not the case just a couple weeks ago. It's nice to see Hansama get a little bit more time and attention, but at the same time, you can kind of tell that Misfits' synergies are off as a result. Power of Evil isn't quite as far ahead, so he's not able to take the duels that they're used to taking to accelerate their early game. Maxlore doesn't have as easy, because he's having to split his time across multiple different lanes rather than being able to focus purely on getting the solo lanes ahead. That's made his pathing a little bit weird. We're seeing, I think he is a underrated player. I'm not going to say criminally underrated, but we're getting there. People keep asking me, like, what do you think about Maxlore's season? I thought he had a very good season. Put up good numbers. He did everything that Misfits asked him to do. He has a role within the system, and he executed it as well as most people could. You can argue whether or not that's a good role to fill, but that's a team problem, not a him problem. Right. He's doing his job, and I think he should be happy with how that went. It's just that, this team needs to win early. We have seen time and time again, if Misfits aren't getting those first 3 towers, if they aren't cementing that lead and letting Power of Evil roam and opening up the map in that regard and buying some space for Alfari, who has just become a mess, that's when things go wrong. This team is not going to be able to out-team fight the Unicorns of Love. It's just never going to happen. But they don't necessarily need to. They have... the good news for them is that their early game is significantly better than the Unicorns of Love. Right now, Misfits, 4th in the league at a 54.4 early game rating. The Unicorns of Love are 9th at 44.0. The Unicorns of Love dig themselves into holes rather often, and significant ones. The minus 518 average goal differential at 15 minutes. That's a huge concern for a team that we're used to, like, taking these big tempo trades. It's hard to have tempo when you're playing from behind. So it very well could be a closer series than people think. They battled to a full 3-game series when they played in the regular season. I would not be surprised if this went the full 5. I think it's going to go 4, but I think going the full 5 is absolutely in play because the Misfits' best player is against Unicorns of Love's weakest player, and Misfits' strength is against Unicorns of Love's biggest weakness. That helps make up the gap.
You say that. I get where you're coming from. Oh, they have a better early game rating, but Unicorns of Love have proven for 2 splits now they don't care about goal deficits.
No,
that doesn't exist. And I know that the mid-late game rating that Tem7 Hughes and Feroracle's Elixir has created is basically just it's the difference between their win percentage and their early game rating. But Unicorns of Love is 2nd in mid-late game rating. They catch up 16 percentage points to their win-loss record based off of their late game. And oh, by the way, Misfits loses 7.5 points based off of their mid to late game. So again, you're then matching up Unicorns of Love greatest strength matches up against Misfits greatest weakness in that regards of Misfits doesn't know what they're doing past 20 minutes in the game. They don't have a macro play. They don't team fight very well because they are completely reliant on Power of Evil just making big plays. And I trust everyone on Unicorns of Love to make big plays more than I trust Power of Evil. Every single player on Unicorns of Love has shown they are straight up a baller. That they don't care.
Well, this is why I had to get Misfits out of the way, because yes, I do think the Unicorns of Love win this series.
Okay.
Like, I wrote an entire article about how Power of Evil slips in that regard. Like, this is a team that, in Misfits, they try so much to make those plays, and I do believe that they're going to get away with at least one win because their early game just stops and Unicorns fall too far behind. It could happen twice. At best, I could see it happening twice, but there's no way it happens 3 times. Right. Unicorns of Love are the better team. They're more cohesive as a team-fighting team. They have a strategy that they are much more comfortable with. We are still seeing some growing pains with Misfits as they're trying to make this adjustment to a more balanced offense. That is taking time, and we're seeing the flaws of it and how they've been performing the last few weeks. And I don't think that's going away, whereas Unicorns of Love, they might have flaws. We might look at Exile and point out that he is one of the worst laning mid laners that we've seen, not just this year, but in general, just really, really struggling to, keep himself relevant in those regards. And we're looking at, I swear, minus 313 goal differential at 10 minutes. I wasn't going to bring up the number, and then I realized it was more than 3 times worse than the next closest. Actually, it's more than 4 times worse than the next closest. The next closest being Coscu at negative 78.
So you don't want to be compared to Coscu.
Your rating is 4 times worse than Coscu.
Oh, man, you don't want to be compared to Coscu. That's really bad.
Just bringing that up, Unicorns of Love fans. This is when we talk next week and you guys are mad at me because I think Unicorns of Love are going to be underdogs in the semifinals. I'm just letting you know that's the number that we're seeing. Luckily he's not the entire Unicorns of Love team. They have Samix, who Samuel Hernandez Fort, I believe it is. People are really excited about him, and they should be. He has delivered on everything I thought he could be and more. I really am excited to see how he's been handling these team fights. I think Xerxes is the linchpin to making Unicorns of Love work, and the better he plays, the farther they're going to get in these playoffs. He just does so much to facilitate the rest of the team as far as putting pressure on multiple lanes in the map, making sure that Chachi isn't caught overextending too often, making sure that you have, the ability to keep Exile at least solvent, keep him livable, workable in that regard. He has, he has a wide enough range of champions that he can play different things that can really move stuff around and give them different opportunities and allow them to counterpick in certain places. So there's a lot that Unicorns of Love bring to the table that Misfits just don't have. And in the playoffs, those intangibles matter so much more. You need someone who can lead. You need a system that everyone is buying into.
Yeah. And you're missing the one last thing. You have Sheepy versus Daku.
Oh my God, that's just man.
We want to talk about a coaching mismatch. Like this is a pretty incredible coaching mismatch. I think if you look at the two, Daku hasn't done anything to make me think like that he's influencing his team in any way, shape, or form in a positive direction. Where Sheepy, I remember back IEM San Jose, I remember all the jokes we made about him, that he shouldn't be a coach anymore, they should have been cut, yada, 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 yada. He has grown into his own. He has created the system that maximizes his players' strengths and tries to minimize their weaknesses and tries to use these players in unique ways that then covers up the weaknesses of other players. You know, think about the Visit Chachi, classic Darren kind of over-pressure the top side of the map to constantly draw attention, to constantly pull them up here. And look at how many times that's opened up a little bit of space for the bot lane to just take a bot towers, opened up a little bit of space for Exile to go into the bot lane and start his split push and gradually catch up from these, bad laning phases that he has. This team is very interesting in how all the pieces interact with each other. And I think that's because of Sheepy. And Sheepy's got to win a Coach of the Year, right?
Not this year.
Not this year.
This was not a good Unicorns of Love split. They had some bad losses. That loss to Vitality excuses anyone for being coach of the split.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's like I know I said that when we finished the intergroup stage that Vitality was going to play spoiler and ultimately choose who the winner of that division was.
Yeah.
Called it? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean it. Like I didn't ask for it to be this way, but also called it. Like that was a classic trap game, and you can't fall for a trap like that to be the best coach in the league. So Sheepy should have one in his cabinet. It's a shame that he doesn't. I certainly trust him well more here against Daku. Daku, I don't know what he's bringing to the table. That's
Pat Riley, he is not. Eric Spoelstra, he is not.
I mean, it says a lot that they're still trying to change so much about the way they play the game as we're this close to the quarterfinal. Like, you would really theoretically have wanted to start these, style changes week 3, week 4, when we started realizing that this was going to be at least a bit of a problem in the long run. And they just have waited way too late. And I think that's ultimately what cost them here. Unicorns of Love have been more consistent, more cohesive, and for longer. And as much as I like Maxor and Power of Evil and Hansama, that's not enough. You need to be a team rather than just having a couple great players. And right now, Misfits is a group of somewhat, good to great players, but not. We don't have the glue that's keeping it together as a cohesive team. So,
absolutely. So Chase.
Yeah.
Will the Unicorns be turned into glue, or will they stampede all over Misfits? Where do you think the line is?
I have it at -250 because they always sleep on Unicorns a little bit.
You're gonna nail this. I slept on them a little too much. I said it was Unicorns of Love -225. It is Unicorns of Love -250. So
there we go.
You take the point. We're just gonna go over to the handicap bets.
Let's Misfits underdog first.
Misfits is at +185.
Okay.
And we're just gonna hop over to the map over/under. Over 4.5 maps, so 5 maps is at +185.
Okay.
And then we think that Misfits wins a game. So Misfits winning one game is at minus. Oh wait, nope. I'm reading that wrong. So basically, you would take the Unicorns of Love -1.5 odd line, which is -105. If you think that Misfits are going to win a game.
That's not how that works. -1.5 for Unicorns of Love means they win by at least 2. So they can win 3-1 or 3-0. Oh. That has nothing to do with Misfits.
Yeah, they win 3-1 or 3-0. Yeah, so that's if Misfits wins a game.
No, 3-0, Misfits would not have won a game. And that would still be a winning bet. Yeah. It has nothing to do with Misfits. Misfits is, what's Misfits +1.5?
+1.5 is at +125.
Okay.
Or -125. I still always get confused with this. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you're not right.
I'm pretty sure I am. Misfits +1.5 is at -125.
Okay.
That's them winning 2 games or better, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's them winning 2 games or better.
Plus 25 there, then it's going to be way out of
minus
value.
125. Yeah, no, yeah, Misfits only winning 1 game is at so Misfits plus 2.5 comes out to minus 416.
Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
no, so Unicorns of Love
like
at minus 1.5 is Unicorns of Love minus 1.5 is either they get a 3-0 or they 3-1, correct?
Yeah, but it has you're coming at it from different angles. To make sure it's clear to the viewers, when we talk about Unicorns of Love minus 1.5, we're taking the score of the series, subtracting 1.5 points from Unicorns of Love, and we're seeing whether it's still higher. That's why it has to be a 3-1 or a 3-0. For Misfits plus 1.5, we are adding 1.5 points to Misfits and saying that will be higher. So it would have to be a 3-2, or they would have to win the series. Those are it's a completely different series of bets. They could not be more different than what you're betting on. Minus for Unicorns and plus maps for Misfits are in 2 different directions.
Okay.
Yeah, I promise you this is correct.
As long as we've been doing this part still just confuses me. And so if we think that Misfits wins a game, we could take Unicorns of Love at minus 1.5 and be fine.
Yeah, as long as you don't think that Misfits wins at least 2 games.
Yeah, no.
You're saying that Misfits wins 1 game or fewer with that bet.
I don't think
Misfits wins 2
games. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the only value in any of those lines, and that's at minus 105. There's no value in this series.
5 maps plus 185 is not terrible.
No, it's not happening.
It's
Misfits
Unicorns,
are not that
man.
good.
The Unicorns don't necessarily slam the door on anybody.
Misfits are not good.
I'm not saying they're great. I'm not saying they're great.
They got 3-1 last split. They're not good.
I mean, first of all, they didn't get they got 3-1 when they got to the semifinals, and there was, I mean, we'll see. I don't think this Unicorns of Love team is as good as last split's Unicorns of Love team. They don't look.
I don't think this Misfits team is as good as last year's Misfits team.
Oh, that's fair. Okay,
that's the problem. It's more of an indictment. I don't think Misfits are good.
That's fair. Let's move forward.
G2 versus Splice.
Yeah.
Okay, you're excited for it?
I mean, I'm excited for the playoffs, man.
Sell me on it. I'm not excited for Europe in the slightest, if I'm being very honest. Yeah. I'm not. Not when I have North America. North America is exciting. This is just kind of like, okay, there's 4 good teams and there's 2 not good teams. Well, look, and I have to get through the not good teams to get to the good teams, so.
I would love to see Splice prove us wrong. And let's start by saying this. If we were going to do ups and downs this week, G2 would have been my down. This was a bad week for G2. This was a week in which they lose to Roccat in a series in which they actually tried, from all accounts. You look at the pick and ban, they weren't doing trolly things. They were beat by a Roccat team that played more cohesively, that took advantage of Trick's champion pool issues. You're looking at a Roccat win that very much was cleaner than it had any right to be. You look at, in game 2, G2 did exactly what you would expect G2 to do. They crushed, and it wasn't particularly close. But Roccat were better around objective controls. They prepared for Baron better. They prepared for, those kind of neutral objectives a lot better. They did good base exchanges. They did a very good job of taking advantage of mistakes and really using the most out of the Baron, which is all to say G2's rotations were slow. G2 was off. Their vision wasn't there. Their rotations were slow. They weren't reacting in time, and they were losing fights because they were kept off balance. And then they took it to Fnatic, and they got crushed. This was a terrible series of losses. You can say, well, in game 1, at least it was close for a bit, but Fnatic was very much in control for most of that series. It felt like Trick could not get going. Perks looked underwhelming, especially on the Lucian pick. Not that he was terrible, he just wasn't great, and you need to be great to justify Lucian in the mid lane, because it's so difficult when you get to the mid to late game without having any sort of crowd control or whatever else coming from that position. So you have to justify it, and they couldn't. And we're at this point now where I do think that G2 is exploitable. I do not think they are invincible here.
What's G2's identity? What's their identity this split?
It's the same identity they've had. The problem is they're just not doing it as efficiently. It's Trick gets ahead early and controls the map. As when G2 gets a lead, they are terrifying. And I know that, like, we talk about H2K and the machine a lot because they should be talked about. It's a machine that operates the same way basically every time. But when you look at G2, their escalation between like the 20 and 25 minute mark is staggering. They don't have the same early game. They don't have Jankos coming through. They have Trick, and he's more about setting up certain map advantages. But when they start taking towers, it's one after the next, after the next, after the next. It's this steamrolling and just using this momentum behind them. And they force the enemy so far back on the defensive that they can't contest for these neutral objectives that G2 takes. And as soon as they get a Baron, the game 2 against Roccat, like, they got a Baron, game was over. It was done. It was irrelevant. And G2 have done that so many times this split. When they get those objectives, they know how to use them effectively. They capitalize on those moments. The problem is those moments aren't happening as often because they're not controlling the map the way they used to. Because Trick isn't getting those invades in, so they're not keeping the jungler off. They're not able to get that free vision. They're not able to get those early towers going as quickly as they used to because they're not winning lane the way that they used to. So the whole thing is just a worse version of what they've been doing. The strategy hasn't changed. These are the same players. They're just not. They're instead of winning lane by a lot, they're winning lane by a little. Instead of getting a whole bunch of towers, they're sometimes struggling to find those early openings. And when they win, they look as strong as anybody in the league. They have the ability to take some of the most dominant victories that we've seen in Europe this year. But when they lose, it is frustrating. It is frustrating because you watch a team that feels like they should be better at every point of the game. You never watch G2 and say, like, oh, yeah, they just couldn't keep up with this team. That's never the takeaway. The takeaway is when they needed to this split against the best teams and Roccat, the Kingslayers. I'm going to keep saying that because I can. They didn't execute properly, and they haven't been executing as sharply as they need to. And at some point, we stop saying that this is a meta thing, and we start saying this is a mental thing. This is a block that is in their heads that they are not able to overcome, that they have not shown an ability to adjust to this new information, this new status quo, if you will. And that has to be taken seriously. We have to be willing to reevaluate that as analysts and as fans and readjust our expectations, because this is not the same G2 team. It is and it isn't. It's the same G2 team in style and in purpose and in how they want to win these games. It is not the same G2 team in terms of the sharpness of the execution, the depth that they have showed on champion pools in previous metas, the comfort in exerting their power across the map. So it's frustrating.
I don't know if I agree with that, because I don't know if they've decided which way they want to win the game. If we look at their 3 championship runs, they had a very clear identity of, and the first one was, we just are going to simply completely overwhelm people with our early games. And then they went to Worlds, and it switched to this super late game focus kind of play style, and they just would run out of steam. And then they got Weldon, they did the whole focus on the late game, that entire thing, and that's how that all went. It's weird. Weldon hasn't existed this split.
Yeah, look, I gotta tell you, this is not a late game G2. Their average game time is 34.3 right now. That puts them at the same time as
But it doesn't feel like when Trick came out and burst onto the scene and won MVP the first split and was just just absolutely crushing kids in the early game either. This team feels directionless. Like they're just playing to win, not we're playing to win in this particular way. It feels like they're kind of just relying on Expect to have a big game, or Perks to have a big game, or Sven to have a big game, not in a very structured, this is the G2 way to play League of Legends, and this is how we are going to win.
I'd say that it's the same. I will contest that. I do think that this is a team that relies on fighting around neutral objectives to win the game. That is their plan. When they get a Baron, they use it more effectively than everyone else in the league. And it does, like, The early game, we could say it's not as sharp. We don't have as clear of a focus as to where Trick is going to get his advantage, whether Trick is going to be the one who takes the advantage. But their mid to late game plan is very clear, and it is not to scale up and do big team fights. It is to take Barons and Dragons, push those tower advantages, and snowball. And just when they get that first tower going, bam, 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 now you're dead. That's what they do. Their best games are when they win by the 30-minute mark. Like, it's at minute 30, they're taking the Nexus towers, because at the 23-minute mark, they got their first Baron and took 5 towers off of it. And then they got the second one, it just closed, and that was the game. Like, that is a G2 victory. They're just not doing it as often. And and they're only really taking those wins against the worst teams, which is a problem.
I would say that's lacking an identity then. If the way that you're supposed to win isn't working, that... I don't know.
Well, you could say that they need to switch their identity, but it doesn't mean they don't have one. I could call myself Mr. Fligglebottoms, and that would be an identity. It wouldn't be a great one, but I could be Fligglebottoms. It's possible. It would, it's a literal choice I could make. Really shouldn't. But it's an identity. That's all identity means.
Hey, Chase, I found what your punishment is when you lose the belt this split.
Oh, man, great.
That is awesome. Oh,
I love it so much.
You ran into that one. That was, wow.
Okay. We should probably talk about Splice.
I don't know how to transition from Fligglebottoms to Splice.
Got it.
Go talk about Splice, Mr. Fligglebottoms.
Poor
please.
Fligglebottoms, man. Look, I want to like the Splice team so much more than I do. The bottom half of the map is awesome. It's really like Kabi is a great player. I think that they're underestimated in the bot lane, man. I still Kabi was a guy that I have wrestled with as to where I want to put him in my all-pro list. Mickey has still been one of the best engaged supports in the league. When they have those teamfight victories, it's usually because he made a play. And Senkux has looked great this split.
Senkux has looked fantastic.
Unironically, no
weeks,
qualifiers there. He's looked great, especially on roaming mid laners. It reminds me very much of the hype that we had for him when he first entered the league, when we knew him as an assassin player that used to terrify people around the map. And then they stopped doing that, and we were really confused. And now he's doing that again, and I can see why that worked back then, and I'm glad to see that's still something he can fall back on. I don't think it's enough here because of where their weaknesses are. Wonder has struggled in weeks and weeks. I think a slump is fair to say. He's really just not found his center. He's not split pushing as effectively as he used to be. And very often he's finding himself in the middle of his team with teleport up, so wasting the opportunity to use it because he's so afraid of being behind because his timings have been so bad. And he has been, his timings have been off. They don't seem to know how to use his teleport effectively anymore, which is a huge concern for a team that's greatest strength was, hey, we can team fight effectively. But it's rough. I think that, as long as Trashy is their jungler, they're never going to have a great early game. And if they're not going to have a great early game, then you better be these great team fighters. You better be really good at exerting pressure along the map. That's who Splice was when they did very well in the summer split and finished second. That's who they were up until Game 3 of Splice versus Misfits last split.
Yep.
In a series that they absolutely should have won, but they didn't because they choked, and that's where we are now. And now I'm not sure. Now I'm not sure whether they have that in them. I don't know if they can get back to that. I think something's been lost in the equation here, and it could be Yamato Cannon.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm writing an article that will hopefully be out, if not, tomorrow. It should be out by Friday is my goal. And I think that when you look back at Splice and the way that they came into 2017 and the way they wanted to approach the season and the role that they believed at that time that Yamato Cannon played in that, and then you look at what happened after his departure, I think those intangibles are missing. I think that's the reason they ended up firing Givas, is because he wasn't bringing them the leadership and the system and the kind of growth that you want from a coach. And does that mean that Yamato Cannon was necessarily going to be the best answer until the end of time? No. It doesn't necessarily mean that he was the right choice, and we can explicitly say firing him was wrong. But what they decided to do to replace him did not work. Just factually has not worked, has not built a new system. This does not feel like a Splice that has the same Splice identity, the Splice brand of League of Legends that we used to praise and that, Marty, when he came on the show, really brought up. That's not there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's the part that's just, as a fan, it's got to be rough to watch. I feel bad for Splice fans because so much of what they loved is still the same, but it just doesn't matter because they're not getting to that point anymore, at least not really reliably. And beating up on bad teams doesn't make me feel better about where they stand.
That's fair. I agree with that. I agree with the point that there feels like there's something missing. There's Marty. I know you listen. It feels like the meat sauce is missing off this trash plate, dude. Feels like the meat sauce recipe needs to be adjusted a little bit. You need that little bit of accoutrement on top of your trash plate. I have faith that you guys will figure it out, and maybe, just maybe, you figure it out in this series against G2, who, you're starting to sell me on like being a little bit more lukewarm on G2 here. I get where you're coming from. Chase,
whatever team emerges from this has to have stepped up.
Yes.
That's how they're going to get past this. That's how they're going to get to the semifinals. They're going to have to take a significant step forward because it's very likely that H2K will be awaiting the winner of this series. And I don't think either one of these teams is better than H2K right now. No. Though, of course, H2K in playoffs will. So.
Listen, they made it to the semifinals of Worlds last year. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. How'd their playoffs go?
Made it to the semifinals of Worlds. That's a playoff run.
Yeah, sure.
It is. They played in the playoffs of the World Championship.
I know. That was for.
Where do you think the line is, Mr. Ficklebottom?
Right shout out to you, man. I have it at minus 300.
You're gonna take this.
There we go. That's a point right there.
I had G2 at minus 250. It's G2 minus 278. So you get it by like 3 points.
3 points. I take those.
Splice
is what?
Yeah, there you go. Splice is at plus 200.
I needed that win because otherwise, like when we only have these two games, like it's so easy for us to tie in each of these weeks. Every single map matters.
I know. It's kind of a pain.
What are the
five maps is at plus 270? I think that's
no.
Yeah. There's no value. There's no value in these playoff series. There's none. Splice 1.5 is at minus 105.
Splice at minus 105 for plus 1.5?
Yeah.
I like that, actually. If we're gonna I feel like this is the playoffs, so I feel like we should do at least one smart money bet for both series. And let's just get into smart money bets now. Because I think that we're there.
No. I don't think either of this series you should bet on. If you want smart, if you want intelligent as a gambler, and I know it's breaking our code, but if we're gonna take one, you could talk me into Splice at plus 1.5 at minus 105.
Yeah.
But there's no value. There's no value here because there's nothing that tells me that Splice is going to beat G2. There's no historical context or anything that says that is really likely to happen and that plus 200 is good value for you. There's nothing that tells me that Misfits matches up to Unicorns of Love in any way, shape, or form. So unless then you want to go off on something like Unicorns of Love 2-0ing or 3-0ing Misfits or something ridiculous where then we've already admitted we are pretty sure Power of Evil is going to have one game where he just takes over and wins a game. I'm sure there will be one game that Splice has a little bit more consistency in their team fighting and their late game decision making. They can win a game. There is no value here. And you can't talk me into there being value where there's no value.
Okay. Well, how about this? We'll say, like we did at Week 10, when I told you all not to gamble because Week 10 is screwy and teams weren't going to care and it was going to get weird, we are going to say, you as listeners should be very careful when betting on these series because neither one appears to have any value. Now, for those of us who run a podcast, what are our picks?
Splice plus 1.5 at minus 105. That is all. That is the only pick that I made.
Misfits, pick one.
No. There is no bet there that is smart. There's
Unicorns
none.
of Love -1.5, -105 doesn't do it for you? Because you didn't like. I think we're both very cold on Misfits.
Fine.
There we go. There we
Fine.
go. See, was that so bad?
I'm not betting on this weekend. No.
I'm not saying again. We have very special rules because we held up a podcast in which we have a section called Smart Money Bet.
And the smart money bet is don't bet!
But look, okay.
Don't lose money!
Smart this week. But you can't have a smart money bet section with no bets.
Yes, I can. Yes, you can. You can say there is no smart bet on here that the potential outcome is worth the risk. You can say that. There is a point where you could say, you know what? I'm just not going to do anything because no matter what I do, it's not as smart as me doing nothing. -105 isn't worth it to me in that regard, in either of those series, really.
That's fair.
That's where I'm coming from, is sometimes the smartest thing you can do is take that $100 in your pocket and go, well, you know what? I've got $100. And I could either do this thing where I'm going to get very little payoff for risking it, and if something weird happens, then I'm out $100, or I just keep it in my pocket and save it for next week, where maybe I'll get more value on something else, and I could double up next week.
If you think that you're going to find value next
Probably
week...
not. I don't think there's any value in Europe. I don't think there's any value in Europe. I think that betting on the European playoffs is probably a fool's errand at this point. And just straightforward honesty.
Are the two bets that we, having a podcast, are going to put out there into the world. But you guys should not bet. I think that's safe to say.
No.
There we go. Compromise, Walter. It's all about compromise.
I mean, that's fair. I will compromise. You sort of cut out for that. So the smart money bets are Unicorns of Love -1.5 at -105. Splice +1.5 at -105. That's Europe, folks. I'm not excited for Europe. These games are going to be like pulling teeth for me to watch, just like Week 10 was. Chase, I know you're more excited. You got the point this week.
Yes. Excited about the point. I'm probably more excited about the point.
I know you're more excited about the point than the games.
I'm really tired of the way you've lorded this belt over me. I think this needs to come to an end. But if you guys want to talk to me about anything I said today on the podcast, you should find me at RedShirtKing on Twitter. You can also comment in those lovely YouTube comment sections. I do respond to as many people as I can. I don't think I did a very good job of it last week, but that's because Week 10 was weird, both in real life and also out of it. So I will do a much better job this week of responding to all of you guys. And obviously you should hang out in our Discord. We've got a lovely Discord. More people seem to be joining every week, which is awesome because a lot of great people on there, a lot of good conversations. You can have everything ranging from, whether, this all-pro selection is a good idea or not, to what's the cutest player in the NALCS. Let's find out. Bonus pod coming this offseason to a theater near you.
No, it's not. At least not with me on it. That will not happen.
Well then, I guess you'll be missing out on the greatest episode in Rough Drafts history, TBT.
You mean me maintaining and becoming a 3-time reigning, defending, guess the line's world heavyweight champion, because that's what this little picture down here says. I'm the champion, not Chase. I'm the champion. And if you want to talk with the champion, you can follow him on Twitter. He's at Ceades_LOL. And I'm sure all of you lovely European fans will just come after me this week and crucify me. But guess what? I have a fancy championship belt and you don't. So, whatever. If you want to talk some trash, go ahead. I'm down for it. I've got North America to watch. That's going to be super exciting. You guys can come back tomorrow to hear our thoughts on the North American playoffs. And until then, goodbye. You can follow the Rough Drafts Podcast on all your favorite social media sites. Twitter at Rough Drafts Pod, Facebook.com/Rough Drafts Pod, SoundCloud.com /Esports Rough Drafts, YouTube.com /Rough Drafts Podcast, as well as on iTunes by searching for the Rough Drafts Podcast. The Rough Drafts Podcast is supported by our lovely Patreons at patreon.com/roughdraftspod and by viewers like you. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, Internet.